Welcome to the Bay. I'm so pumped you've docked your rig here today because we've got a massive hardware explainer lined up for you. We're talking a definitive head-to-head showdown between a totally battle-tested champion and this absolute dreadnought that just rolled into the harbor. Yep, it's the brand new RTX 5090 squaring off against the venerable RTX 3080 12GB. You know, with game optimization being such a wild card lately, developers are just leaning heavier than ever on pure hardware brute force. So figuring out exactly when to upgrade, well, it's harder than it's ever been. If you've been sitting on that 30 series card, kind of scratching your head, wondering if it's finally time to pull the trigger, you are in the exact right place. Let's get into it.
Upgrading your setup, it's always a bit of a nautical journey, right? You've got to navigate this crazy, volatile hardware market, somehow dodge all the over-the-top marketing hype, and just figure out what actually makes sense for the exact rig sitting on your desk. And this matchup, the trusted 30 series against the absolute bleeding edge of the 50 series, it's honestly one of the most fascinating upgrades we've seen in a long time. Now, notice we're entirely skipping the 40 series here. That's on purpose. We're looking at a multi-year gap where hardware demands have just skyrocketed since the 3080 originally launched. We are talking about some minor iterative spec bump. No way. This is a fundamental shift in how graphics are processed, so we really need to take a serious look at what you actually need. To make sure we're charting the right course today, all the performance data, the hardware charts, and the value metrics you're going to see in this explainer, they're all sourced directly from the absolute pros over at bestgpusforgaming.com. Seriously, they are an incredible resource for us PC builders. Their team does the heavy lifting, all the rigorous benchmark testing, and the deep dive technical stuff. So their data is basically going to be our ultra-precise GPS as we sail through all this hardware intel today. Okay, quick pre-flight checklist for our explainer. Number 1, we'll meet the contenders. 2, we'll check out the architecture and VRAM. 3, we'll bring up the performance HUD. 4, we'll go over the power logistics. And 5, we'll be plotting your course. All right, Section 1, meet the contenders. It's the 4K Titan versus the 1440p Hero. Let's put their raw identities side by side, shall we? On one hand, we've got the RTX 5090. Coming in at a typical price of, brace yourself, $1,999. This is your premium, absolute no-compromise flagship. It's the reigning efficiency king, purpose-built to just crush native 4K gaming without even breaking a sweat. And yeah, that massive price tag, it totally reflects its status as an uncompromising technological marvel. On the other hand, we have the RTX 3080 12GB. Originally positioned around $799, this thing is our highly capable upper mid-range raster hero. And by raster hero, I mean it just obliterates traditional rendering, drawing lighting and shadows the standard way, without the crazy computational tax of real-time ray tracing. It's a card that still punches way above its weight class for 1440p gaming. So right off the bat, we're looking at a massive price and tier difference, which really sets the stage here. Moving to Section 2, Architecture and VRAM. Let's head down into the engine room. Now, the real story down in the engine room, it's not just about raw speed. It's about how much cargo these ships can carry all at once. Look, the 3080 was and still is a fantastic card, but modern games? They're demanding. Now, the 12GB GDDR6X version definitely aged a lot better than the original 10GB model, but it's still running on a 384-bit memory bus. Think of that bus like a shipping channel. The 3080's 384-bit bus is a wide, very capable channel, but the 5090? It makes this absolutely unprecedented leap to 32GB of ultra-fast GDDR7 memory on a massive 512-bit bus. We're talking an ocean superhighway, where those 32 gigs of cargo just flow instantly, zero traffic jams. So, what's the so what for you? It means the 5090 literally eliminates VRAM bottlenecking. You can load up the absolute highest resolution, completely uncompressed textures at 4K, and your system won't choke or stutter for even a single millisecond. Section 3, the performance HUD. Time to take these GPUs out into open water for a gaming head-to-head. Let's check out the actual gaming frame rates, again, pulling from that extensive testing over at bestgpusforgaming.com. The advantage the 5090 holds when you crank up those demanding features is, well, it's frankly staggering. Take Cyberpunk 2077 on ray tracing high settings. The 3080 12G gives you a very respectable 92 frames per second.
That's a totally playable, great experience. But the 5090, it pushes a massive 150 FPS. And if you jump into high-octane competitive shooters like Warzone, you're going from 195 FPS on the 3080 all the way up to an astonishing 320 FPS on the 5090. That crazy leap is powered by the new Blackwell architecture paired with DLSS4 frame generation. If you aren't familiar with it yet, DLSS4 uses advanced AI to actually predict and draw entirely new frames between the natively rendered ones. It artificially smooths out the voyage, putting the 50 series in an entirely different galaxy for heavy ray tracing. The really crucial takeaway here is this absolutely staggering delta. Across the board, at native 4K resolution, the RTX 5090 is pushing 60 to 90% faster performance depending on the game. 60 to 90%. And it's not just peak frames, it boasts vastly superior 1% lows. So those sudden, jarring stutters or frame drops you might sometimes get during a massive in-game explosion, completely ironed out. Just buttery, smooth sailing. It's offering an uncompromised native 4K experience, which, let's be honest, the aging 3080 architecture just struggles to maintain in today's heaviest titles unless you start heavily turning down settings. Okay, Section 4, Power Logistics. Let's talk about navigating the physical integration. Raw frames really aren't the whole story here, guys, because dropping a massive 5090 Dreadnought into your current dock, it requires some serious workshop planning. You literally cannot just slap this card into a 5-year-old rig and expect smooth sailing. The 5090 draws a massive 575 watts. That means you absolutely have to secure proper power delivery. We're talking a high-quality 1,000-watt power supply at a bare minimum just to handle the transient power spike safely. Oh, and it's 304 millimeters long. That is roughly the size of a small cinder block. You need serious case clearance. If you don't plan out your hull space, your airflow, and your cable management, well, you're going to be dealing with severe thermal throttling and some pretty dangerous cable spaghetti. By contrast, the 3080 pulls about 350 watts and is considerably easier to fit into a standard mid-tower case. So yeah, dropping in a 5090, that is a true heavy-duty enthusiast project. Moving to Section 5, the value proposition. Let's crunch the numbers on pure FPS per dollar. Look, as builders, we all love sky-high frame rates, but we also got to respect our wallets, right? Let's consult those charts from bestgpusforgaming.com one more time for a pure value check. When you take the frame rates and divide them by the current market prices, something really fascinating pops out. If you take a game running at 1440p and divide the raw FPS by the dollars spent, the 5090 sits at a 0.13 value score. Basically, it charges a massive premium for that top-tier, undisputed performance. But the 3080 12GB, specifically because it is depreciated into an absolute value king on the used market, it's sitting way up at 0.22. This brilliantly illustrates that a used market 3080 12GB actually offers shocking FPS per dollar value if you are strictly a 1440p gamer. The 5090 is all about maximum uncompromised performance. It is definitely not about budget value. All right, Section 6, plotting your course. Which GPU should you actually dock in your rig? With all this high-tech hood data laid out for us, from the massive VRAM specs to the sheer power draw, right down to those striking value propositions, you really have to ask yourself, what kind of builder are you right now? Are you a savvy 1440p holdout, just waiting patiently to win the silicon lottery on a sweet used deal? Or are you chasing that absolute cutting-edge 4K horizon, totally refusing to turn down a single in-game setting? Let's break this down into 3 specific builder personas. First up, the no-compromise 4K gamer. If you've got a gorgeous QD OLED 4K monitor, you demand native resolution with heavy ray tracing, and you want absolutely zero VRAM bottlenecks for the next several years, well, the 5090 is definitively your vessel. Prep your power supply and make the jump. Second, the current 3080 owner. If you already have a 3080 12GB and your primary setup is a high-refresh 1440p monitor, that card is still incredibly seaworthy. You can safely hold your position and just skip this generation entirely without any major FOMO. And third, the used market buyer. If you're building a brand new rig on a strict budget, but you still want premium 1440p performance, hunting down a 3080 12GB on the used market is just an incredibly smart play that maximizes literally every dollar you spend. But before we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with one final, kind of provocative thought to chew on. How long can 12 gigabytes of VRAM truly survive the stormy seas of increasingly unoptimized, heavy modern AAA games? You know, as game developers lean harder and harder on AI upscaling, zero optimization, and these incredibly massive texture packages, that 12 gigabytes might start feeling pretty cramped a lot sooner than you think.
If you want to dive deeper into that exact question, especially how AI workloads and local large language models are completely changing VRAM requirements, I highly recommend checking out bestgpusforgaming.com for their in-depth hardware guides. All right, that's it for today's explainer. Until next time, keep it cool and keep building.